Hi, Steve Rambam. Thanks so much for coming on the show and giving us some of your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I was wondering if you could give us kind of a brief biography of yourself, please.
Well, I'm a private investigator. I'm licensed in a number of locations. I'm the owner of Pallorium, which is an investigative agency with offices in New York and Texas, and licenses in a number of other locations. I've been doing this sort of thing for a little more than a quarter of a century. I personally specialize in missing persons cases and in multi-jurisdictional cases, which basically means international investigations. And in addition to all of that, I have a very strong presence, I think, in the online and hacker communities. We own Peoplefinder.net. We own Identity Check. We own Check My Identity. We do quite a bit of lecturing in the hacker community and the law enforcement community. And I gather that's where you ran across my name.
Yeah. I mean, how did that actually end up happening? How did you get involved with the hacker community?
Well, I've spoken at every single Hope conference going back for the past, I guess it's 18 years. You know, first of all, they're just terrific guys and girls. They are intelligent. They are inquisitive. They are a pleasure to talk to. They're a pleasure to be around. You know, they're not the stereotypical nerds wearing heavy black glasses and, you know, carrying pocket protectors. They're typically pretty sharp, pretty remarkable people. And frankly, there's a lot in common between the hacker community and the law enforcement community. We both have as our ultimate goal finding out about things. The more concealed the information, the more we want to find it. And we both very strongly believe that information should not be frozen. It should not be locked up for the privileged few. That a real democracy has open information where people can find out about things and make informed decisions and not have to be among the numb and the dumb, relying on just a few informed people for guidance and information.
Yeah, definitely. So, going back a little bit, how did you get into private investigation? And actually, for people that don't actually really know, what is a private investigator or a private detective? Is there a difference?
It's two terms for the exact same job, for the exact same individual. Private investigator is more popular today because it's more professional. It doesn't imply, a gumshoe lurking in a doorway following someone's wife. It's more of a profession. And today, by the way, it is very much a profession. Your typical private investigator is not going to be some knuckle-dragging ex-patrol cop. He's going to be typically someone with a college education or a higher degree. Many attorneys run private investigative agencies. They call themselves investigative consultants or investigative attorneys. You have to have a very strong grounding in the law, constantly updated law. You have to have a very strong grounding in technical skills. It is today not a job; it's a profession.
Yeah, because I remember when I was younger, I always used to want to get into being a private detective or being a private investigator, and I could never find any information. But this was kind of pre-internet, I suppose. But
well, how old are you?
I'm 32.
Well, it's definitely not too late. You are within the typical age range for entry into this profession, 25 to 35.
I have a master's in criminology as well, so I don't know if that helps.
It helps enormously. One of the big questions for a private investigator is presentation of evidence. And, in two areas. First of all, you have to be able to write an intelligent, readable, competent, comprehensive report, which if you've done a master's thesis, you certainly know how to do.
Yeah.
And second of all, you have to have credibility when you're testifying in court or making a presentation, and a higher education degree is a big help. You should not necessarily throw that dream away. I don't know what you're doing now or how successful you are at it, but I would really urge you to consider that. And frankly, I'd be glad to help you after this broadcast. If you'd like to talk for a minute or two, I can direct you to some people in the UK.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's something we can definitely chat about. 'Cause like I said,
Yeah, don't give up on that. I mean, you don't have a criminal record, do you?
Nope.
Would you survive a background exam?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've only ever had a caution.
Would you survive a good background exam?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, well then we should talk after this interview.
Okay, definitely. Okay, so I think what we wanted to talk about today really was kind of go over some of the things that I've heard you talk about before, but I guess in a more of a interview setting in this case. And the kind of main topics I really want to talk to you about are kind of the advancement of technology over the last few years and how that's affected privacy. And then look at some of the kind of components of that, so like social networking, Google, and smartphones. And I think these are all kind of three quite big elements of that. So how would you say, I mean...
Right.
Yeah.
In addition to those, I would add artificial intelligence, and I would add cameras and the ability to automatically interpret what a camera sees. What's called analytics.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's start. Let's start off by looking at kind of technology over the last, say, decade or so, maybe even more than that. I mean, how has it changed from a private investigator's point of view? How has it changed?
Well, it's frankly night and day. It's the difference between the Flintstones and Star Wars. The main things that have changed on a technical level, of course, have been storage space is incredibly cheap now. You can go to your local Staples and buy a 2 terabyte drive for a couple $100. When I started out with computers, a 10 megabyte drive was $2,000 to $3,000. And in case somebody thinks I'm misstating, I'll say that again. A 10 megabyte drive was $2,000 to $3,000. The amount of storage just on a little memory stick that goes in your pocket today was unthinkable when I started out. Processing speed is extraordinary. You have the ability of a Google to keep, and this is literally true, the entire internet in RAM, not even in storage, in RAM. The main thing that's changed, however, has nothing to do with technology, which has, of course, jumped light years ahead. The main thing that's changed are attitudes towards information and privacy. The vast majority of the privacy-invading critical information out there is self-contributed. Things like Facebook, to a lesser extent MySpace, Twitter, Tumblr, various private websites, blogs, email, use of all the Google products that are designed in large part to suck information out of you, indexing of your Gmail, geotagging on your photos that go up on Picasa, and not only self-contribution of data, but the fact that once you contribute that data, it never goes away. I mean, every stupid blog post, every late-night drunken Twitter feed, every stupid photo that you posted while you were in Cancun with a half-naked girl in one arm and a large beer bong in the other, that stuff is there forever. You cannot make it go away.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of brought them up already, but the first real exemplar of that, I'd say, would be sort of the rise of social networking over the last, say, like 5 to 6 years. I mean, there's some quite scary stuff. Could you talk a little bit about kind of, like, say, for example, MySpace profiles and Facebook profiles, and like how this stuff just doesn't go away?
Well, it's interesting. When I started out as an investigator, there were two holy grails of private investigation: getting a photograph of the person and finding out where they physically are at least one point in time, but ideally on an ongoing basis. I can get these two things sitting in my boxer shorts in front of the computer today. Everybody has a photograph on the web, and almost everyone in one way or another is constantly broadcasting their location, whether it's from IP address reversing or geotagging or things like Foursquare or the new Facebook Places or anything like that, I know where you are on a regular basis. It's truly remarkable.
Yeah, and it's completely it's people kind of give it out themselves, don't they? It's not kind of like forced upon them in any way.
And the other thing is, what people don't realize is the picture that I can gather of you by aggregation of data. You know, you may think, okay, where I was on Thursday isn't important, and my photo isn't important, and the fact that I smoke pot isn't important, and who my friends are isn't important, and where I've worked isn't important. That's true. Each of these individual things are fairly innocuous. But with the internet today, a trained monkey can aggregate all this information together and produce a complete and comprehensive and frighteningly accurate picture of you. And I've got to tell you, a big part of it, by the way, is who your friends are. Mm. You know, who watches your Twitter feeds and whose Twitter feeds you follow, who's friended you on Facebook, who has checked into locations on Foursquare the same time you have. You are incredibly accurately defined by who your friends are. Mm. If you're hanging around with a bunch of left-wing, pot-smoking bisexuals, you are, you know, excuse me if you are most likely a left-wing, pot-smoking bisexual. Mm. If you are hanging around with a bunch of fire-breathing, gun-owning, Tea Party Republicans, you are almost certainly a fire-breathing, gun-owning Tea Party Republican. It's just the way it is. You typically hang around with people who have similar characteristics, and that's why it's so important to the marketers and the data aggregators to have all of these various methods of knowing who your friends are.
With, I mean, obviously, recently with Facebook, we've had privacy concerns in the mainstream media. Do you think the average Joe on the street realizes quite how open their data actually is?
A, they don't know, and B, they have no idea how much contempt Google and Facebook have for your privacy. You know, let's take Facebook. Let's take Facebook Places. Mm-hmm. They don't have a feature to turn it off. You have two choices: yes or not yet. Think about that. Google. Let's look at some of the things that Google has done with data. Mm-hmm. They drive down the street taking pictures of people's faces. And taking pictures of people's homes, whether or not it's on a private street or not. And they only undo that or partially mitigate it when they're either sued, in the case of the United States, or legislated in the case of the UK. Google will take someone's blood and sweat and tears in the form of a novel or a nonfiction book, and they will scan the whole damn thing and put it up on Google Books, whether you like it or not. Yeah. They will take registered trademarks and company names and sell them as AdWords and say, tough, you can't do a damn thing about it.
Yeah, they have like contempt for copyright.
These are two companies that have absolute contempt for the private individual and private privacy rights and information rights. The most cursory investigation of their business practices will determine that.
Yeah. I mean, Foursquare is another example. I mean, that just seems... I mean, Twitter seemed strange to me, I've got to admit. And Facebook I can kind of see why, because it kind of at least feels like a closed garden, a walled garden rather. But
well, not remotely. Have you ever turned down a friend request?
Yes, I do actually. I'm quite.
Well, then you are in the great minority. Most people just automatically click on approve for friend requests. You know, mainly because they want to say, "Hey, I've got 1,500 friends on Facebook." Yeah, I mean. Yeah. These people are morons. Do you really think you have 1,500 friends?
Yeah, exactly. It's mad, but I mean, Twitter, you know, reporting basically where you are every 15 minutes it seems insane to me.
Right. Now, you know, there are some logical bases for something like Twitter. You can't constantly be in communication with everyone. So you say, well, if people really want to hook up with me or people really want to know where I am, they can follow my Twitter feed, and it saves me a whole lot of energy. And plus, it saves me minutes on the cell phone and constantly responding to emails and all of that. Now, there is some logic to that. It also is of great convenience to private investigators. So on behalf of all private investigators, to everyone with Twitter feeds, thank you for making my job easier. Foursquare, I don't get.
No.
Checking in 500 times to a location so you can be the mayor? I mean, are you a 12-year-old moron? Cut it out. I mean, what is the significance of that? It doesn't even seem like something that's entertaining. Do you really think you own the quad at the college because you have more check-ins? Trust me, the dean will come out and kick you in the behind. I mean, it's just, Foursquare is ridiculous and an insult to intelligence, and yet it's wonderfully successful. So I'm not sure what that says.
I mean, I've got to admit, I did try out Foursquare for a little while, and then actually I don't know if you've ever heard of them. There's a group called the Phone Losers of America.
No, I haven't heard of that, but it seems appropriate.
Yeah, I think they talk at Hope sometimes as well, but they basically they decided to use it as just a tool for phones pranking people, and I listened to these calls and I just thought, oh my god, this is the most insane thing, like people tracking themselves, It's just,
absolutely, and I have to tell you, as an investigator, I've absolutely lost people on surveillance and just gone to their Twitter feed or their Foursquare and picked them up again.
Yeah.
And I tell you frankly that there are products today. For example, there's an incredible product that was developed by a spook friend of mine in Israel called Rabbi, Raabi, that I talk about all the time, that allows me to surveil you and follow you and find out who your friends are and what you're doing and who your associates are and what your personal characteristics are just by tracking your cell phone.
All right. So how does that actually work then?
Well, think about it. A cell phone is a little snitch in your pocket. And by the way, there's a Newsweek article by that name, and that weasel who wrote it stole it from my Hope Talk. He was actually at my Hope Talk and stole it. So I don't want you to think I'm stealing it from Newsweek. But the cell phone really is a little snitch in your pocket. Think about it. First of all, it tells me who you consider important, who you talk to, how often you talk to them, what hours of the day and night you talk to them, and for how long. If you talk to some female every night for about an hour, she's either your mom or your girlfriend, probably, or somebody you want to be your girlfriend. Not hard to figure that out. If your cell phone is in a drinking establishment every night, you're probably a pretty good drinker. If your cell phone is in a strip club every night, if your phone is in a bookstore every day for an hour, your cell phone will tell me where you hang out, where you work, where you live, who your friends are, what's important to you, where you are on a regular basis, and it will allow me to follow you within 10 to 100 yards of your location everywhere on the planet, just about, unless you're in the middle of the Sahara Desert. So the cell phone is an enormous game changer, and something that hits your cell phone and simultaneously hits the local cell phone towers tells me everything I need to know about you, just about. If I know that you are sitting in a restaurant and sitting within 5 to 10 yards of you are person A, person B, and person C, and they have been within close distance of your cell phone before, I know these people are your personal friends.
Actually, I want to talk to you a bit later about cell phones in a bit more detail.
Well, frankly, cell phones are a show in themselves.
Yeah.
There's just so much to discuss about cell phones, so much to discuss about cell phone hacking, cell phone tracking, analysis of cell phone data. There is no investigation done by private or public law enforcement today that does not involve your cell phone. Yeah. Period.
Definitely. I mean, so before we do get to cell phones, there's one thing I do want to talk to you about, and I really liked your kind of analogy of it. You refer to Google a lot of the time as Skynet. And obviously that's a reference
Well,
to.
it's today it's Skynet on steroids. I called it Skynet in 2006. Today it's beyond Skynet's wildest erotic dream.
So I mean, I guess the best way to look at it is to first look at the kind of the services that Google offer, and maybe some of the things that people don't necessarily consider when they look at those services. You know, for example, Gmail being scammed by bots, etc.
Right.
So I mean, if we could maybe go through some of them, I'd love to do that. So for example, yeah, Gmail.
Well, what you have to understand is Google. Imagine a pair of balancing scales. What you have to understand is Google is the poster child for convenience versus privacy. If you get something that is unbelievably convenient and unbelievably free on the internet, you have to understand what you're giving up. For the equivalent level, you are giving up your privacy. As convenience and lack of cost goes up, privacy goes down. Gmail tells me where you are from your login. It tells me your cell phone, because typically most people these days, most technologically adept people, are mailing from their smartphone. So it tells me where you are. It tells me your cell phone. It tells me what you consider important. It tells me what you're writing about. It tells me who you're writing to. Basically, it tells me your friends, your family, your interests, your physical location, and your daily activities. That's just Gmail. Now, let's pair that with Google Web. Google Web tells me, again, where you are, what your interests are, what you're thinking about. In other words, if you are Googling kidney cancer or kidney cancer cures, either you or somebody you care about has kidney cancer. If you are going in and trying to locate a Google map for a restaurant, you are going to eat at that restaurant. And because I'm Google, I know everything about that restaurant. I know if it's young people, old people, hip people, square people, Indian food, Chinese food, whatever. If you are using Google Groups or Google RSS feeds, I know what your interests are. I know what your politics are. I know if you care about religion and what religion it is you care about. I know whether you are interested in technology, whether you're interested in knitting, whether you're interested in leather crafting. I could go on and on for the next hour. I know everything about your personal interests. Google Voice, oh my gosh. I know who you're talking to, and I know what you're saying. Have you wondered why Google has in the United States Google 411, free information, or Google Voice dialing, or Google Voice searching? It's because they're using you times a million people, or times actually 50 million people, as beta testers for voice recognition software and perfecting that software. And the reason for that is you have Google Voice. I know what you're saying, what people are saying to you, what your voice messages are. Your voice messages popping up in text or popping up in email, think about what that means in terms of Google's ability to monitor your phone calls and monitor your voice messages. Not only do I know what you're emailing back and forth about, I know what you're talking back and forth about. Now, let's just take these few things, and obviously there's 40 other Google things that gather more and more and more information about you. Google Goggles is a perfect example. Android is a game changer. If you have an Android phone, think about just the syncing on that phone. If I want to sync my desktop calendar, my desktop contacts, and my desktop email with that phone, I have to send all of that information to Google, and then they're kind enough to give it back to me on my phone. You have delivered to Google every email address, every phone number, every address, every name of everybody you do business with or give a damn about in one fell swoop. Google instantly, the minute you sync your phone, knows everything there is to know about your most intimate private life.
No,
I mean, it's ridiculous. And if you call an abortion clinic, let's say you're a young female, and one day you call an abortion clinic, you call a guy, you call an abortion clinic, you call the same guy. You physically go with your phone to that abortion clinic, and then you physically go with your phone to a counseling center. What do I now know about you? I know you got, if you'll excuse the colloquialism, knocked up by that guy. You went and you got an abortion, and now you're getting counseling. That's all from your cell phone. That may be a dramatic example, but it's not an unreasonable example. No. It's a very accurate, matter-of-fact sort of thing that guys like me and guys much more sinister than me routinely discern every day by analysis of your cell phone activity. Now imagine I have access, direct Android access to your cell phone, your email, your browsing, your Google goggling, your group surfing, your blog, all of that, and I have access to that for the past 5 years, and I aggregate all that data.
You've got quite a good picture of...
Is there a single living human being, including your mother, your wife, your psychiatrist, who actually knows more about you than I do?
No, that's, yeah, it's quite scary
now,
when you put it that way.
Do you want that little weasel Sergey Brin, or that big weasel, that horrible weasel that owns Facebook? I consider him like Voldemort. I'm not even going to say his name. He is he who shall not be named. Do you want these two creeps, these two young punks, to know that about you? You and everybody you care about and love? Well, too late.
Yeah, it's quite scary when you put it that way, actually.
No, by the way, I'm not a privacy nut. I make my living on use of these tools. And I do believe that there is enormous value and enormous desirability in public records and openness. I just think some of the stuff that people put up, they're idiots. I should not know your sexual orientation. You can be a proud gay activist. God bless you. Keep it to yourself. I should not know that you are a drug user. You should not have a screen name with 420 in it. I should not know that you are, involved in bestiality, which I've seen actual personal web pages discussing.
Really?
Amazingly.
Wow.
I put up, if you've seen my hope speech up on Google Video, privacy is dead, get over it. I put up on the screen a 17-year-old girl. I forget what her webpage title it is. I'm a big slut and I love sucking. Insert the word yourself, but that is actually her screen name. I'm a big slut and I love sucking blank. And she's 17 years old with a picture up there. That will follow her for the rest of her slutty sucking life. Do you want this girl as your babysitter? Do you want this girl 10 years from now as your attorney? Do you want this girl 30 years from now as your senator or your MP? I mean, come on, she's destroyed her life.
How easy would you say it is, though, for the average person to be able to get hold of that information, like later down the line kind of thing? Is this something that, say...
Well, pretty easy for the average person, push of a button for me. And quite often the average person hires me. So I think that's your answer in a roundabout way.
So, I mean, I know that Google tends to cache a lot of stuff, and obviously we get things like archive.org and things like that.
Yes, and there's a wonderful device in the legal system called a subpoena. And I am involved in no case where there's subpoena power where I don't hand the attorney on my side a list of subpoena addresses and what to request. Everything that Google has on you, they give to us, whether they like it or not. They fight, they yell, they scream, tough tooties. They turn it over. Google, Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, everywhere. If we can identify anything that you use, we grab it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one.
And by the way, we can get anywhere from a third to 90% of that information even before the subpoena.
Yeah, just for aggregation and data storage, I imagine.
Well, and do you imagine that Peoplefinder.net, the entity that I own, doesn't suck this down on a regular basis also? and quite often, a lot of my friends and colleagues in the hacker community grab it legally. I mean, 100 million out of the 500 million Facebook pages were spidered by one guy who was kind enough to put up a torrent of it.
Yeah, and there's another site, isn't there, where you can kind of test how private your Facebook profile actually is, and this kind of thing.
Yeah, which is a ridiculous exercise. Your Facebook profile is not accurate. It's not private. One way or the other, I can get it.
Now, one thing I found really fascinating, and I didn't actually know about it until I heard your talk for Hope, was the Cnet incident with Google. I was wondering if you could talk about that.
Oh, that was hilarious. I mean, that just gives you an idea of how arrogant their attitude is. You know, Cnet, a very intelligent woman by the name of Eleanor Mills, who I subsequently met, and she wrote an article about me. And she was in the audience the first time I brought it up, and she came up to me afterwards and said, "Thanks for mentioning that. That was me." She went to interview the Google information officer, I think it was, or the Google president, I forget which, but some high-ranking Googleite. And before she went in there, she just Googled the guy and came up with all sorts of remarkable stuff on him. And towards the middle of the interview, she started asking about privacy, and she said, "Well, by the way, I Googled you, and here's all the stuff I came up with." And the guy went berserk. He popped out of his chair like he was on fire and started yelling, and he threw her out of the office and banned all CNET interviews for a year.
It's insane, isn't it?
You know, which I think is just, you know, A, bad corporate training, and B, quite telling.
Yeah, it's worrying. It's worrying that they are.
Yeah, and probably because he knows what Google actually does gather and thought she might have gotten some of that.
Now, I mean, one thing, I mean, we'll probably come back onto this a bit later, is a lot of, because we interview, in the past we've interviewed conspiracy theorists, and we get, you know, because we look at the counterculture and underground culture, I suppose, we tend to attract that kind of mindset.
Well, okay, I only believe in the conspiracies I've personally verified.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of people wonder why companies like Google and Apple and Facebook and these people, why they gather all this information. To me personally, it seems like just
it's not a conspiracy.
No, it's just capitalism.
It's quite easily discernible what it is. It's simple capitalism. Look, let me give you a marketing 101, or perhaps even a lower number. But let me give you a basic marketing tutorial here in 60 seconds or less. Mm-hmm. I have a product. The typical name for a generic product is a widget. I am manufacturing widgets, and I desire to sell them. I can either get a list of people who I know nothing about and market to all of them, which will cost me a small fortune, even if it's on the internet. If it's on the internet, by the way, it's known as spam. Mm-hmm. But I can send letters or send unsolicited, annoying emails to millions of people that I know nothing about. Or I can go to someone like Google or Apple, or, by the way, any one of a dozen remarkable precision targeted marketing companies that you and the public have never heard about, like InfoUSA and other amazing companies that know everything about you already, that are on a par with Google and Apple or ahead of them even. I can go to one of those companies and say, okay, I have this item. I believe that 65-year-old Chinese grandmothers in the Midwest who limp on their left leg would be especially interested in this. And they will give me a list of 1,000 Chinese grandmothers in the Midwest who are 65 years old or older and limp on their left leg. And therefore, A, I sell quicker, I sell smarter, I sell cheaper, and I don't piss off the whole world and give myself a bad name. This is a basic engine of capitalism.
Yeah.
Your eyeballs and your personal characteristics, your soul, a window into your soul, is worth money. And that's what this is all about. You know, you mentioned Apple, and Apple is another amazing privacy invading story. Let's talk about the iPhone for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Apple is a brilliant, truly brilliant hardware designer. I mean, Apple overnight wiped out all of the eSlate and iRex and pad companies out there, and it's going to get, the iPad is going to get better and better and smarter and more, you know, useful, and all of the, you know, superlatives you can imagine will eventually be attached to it. Overnight, they grabbed the entire market, and I believe they're selling 3 million a month. They are hardware gods.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's look at the iPhone. Why can't you change the battery in the iPhone? Why can't you take out the damn battery?
Because, yeah.
And by the way, why can't you change the battery in a hardware device that has the most miserable battery life on the planet?
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, I know. I don't have an iPhone. And that's one of the reasons. The other is I'm an old guy and I like a physical keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not that old, actually. I'm only a few years older than you, but I like my physical keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you take out the battery?
Because then you could turn it off.
That's right. Give the man a Cupid doll. That is correct. If you can turn off the iPhone, it doesn't track you. It doesn't know where you are. It doesn't know what you're doing. It doesn't follow your push and pull and communication and constant walking around and visiting places and doing things. It is no hardware flaw as far as they're concerned. It is a hardware essential. And by the way, I consider that pretty damn sinister, but apparently the hundreds of millions of people who have iPhones, you know, at least slightly disagree with me.
Well, I have an iPhone, but I tend to turn off the GPS, but obviously I'm fairly convinced.
But you can't.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Everything on your iPhone that can be turned off can be turned on remotely. And I can tell you that I worked on a couple of criminal cases in the past few years where law enforcement bugged people through their iPhones and tracked people through their iPhones.
That's worrying.
Everything that is on your iPhone can be remotely turned on, either with the onboard programs that are there when you buy it, or by getting you to download something one way or the other and putting it on your iPhone without you knowing it, which I have to tell you is just painfully easy to do.
That's worrying. And also, there's another bit of technology called Skyhook, isn't there? That's similar to GPS. It just uses the Wi-Fi pointer.
Well, let me tell you what you're talking about. You're talking about a product, which, by the way, is always part of my lectures, or as I call it, Skynet. Skynet Wireless. What they've done is a really remarkable thing. They've gone all over America, all over Canada. They're doing Europe right now. They've pretty well finished up with the UK, by the way.
Yeah.
And what they've done is they've gone around with their Wi-Fi grabbing trucks, and they have mapped tens of millions, actually close to hundreds of millions, of Wi-Fi nodes. If your iPhone is in a GPS difficult area, meaning I can't really map your location by GPS, I can locate it because I know that you are 2 bars away from IP wireless address 123.456.78.90. And you are 4 bars away from this and whatever. I can triangulate away from you because I know where these nodes are. And by the way, when these nodes move, I know that because I see the resolving IP address on the broadband connection. If you move from, I don't know, I'm going to just pull up 2 English cities. If you move from London to Manchester and you take your router with you and you plug it in, I now know where that router is, and my system analyzes that. It is self-healing. It is self-healing instantly. The original iPhone, by the way, did not have GPS.
No, it was Skyhook only. Wasn't
It was Skyhook 100%. Now, occasionally it would be really silly. You'd be driving across a bridge, and it would show you, 10 yards to the east in the water. But for the purposes of tracking you and invading your privacy and knowing everything you do and everywhere you go, good enough.
Mm.
Now, if you match that with GPS, if I am the operator of a Predator drone, I can shoot a Hellfire missile up your butt. No problem. I won't miss. I can send it in the right window, have it make a left turn at your dining room table, and find you sitting at your computer.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is how the U.S. and Israel and the U.K., for that matter, and all the countries that still are courageous enough to fight the bad guys, that's how they locate a lot of them. Right now, the Taliban, in the areas that they control in Afghanistan at night, so their fighters, their terrorists, can wander around without fear and get a good night's sleep. They actually switch off the cell phone network in those areas.
Yeah, that makes sense as a kind of precautionary measure, I suppose.
Yeah, in case Ahmed, who's on the 10 most wanted list, forgets basic security precautions and calls up Fatima for a late night chat. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting to me is I think you make the example as well, actually, in your lecture, but it's something I've read in sort of academic texts as well, is how the internet, like you were saying with Google and the way they gather data via the computer, that's kind of a map of your life in some ways, whereas the cell phone becomes it's you, isn't it? It's essentially, Well,
first of all, a cell phone is tied to one specific person. It is a privacy invader / precision target marketer's greatest fantasy. 10 years ago, they never fantasized about something like a smartphone. Today, you are owned by that smartphone. They know your name, your address, your phone, your family, your friends, your likes, your dislikes, your religion, your politics, your habits, your hobbies, your constant whereabouts. Everything about you can be discerned from your cell phone. Everything.
Yeah, and I think what's one of the interesting
and it's you.
Yeah, that's worrying. Again.
Well, and it's also, frankly, unavoidable if you want convenience.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, because I know all these things, because I'm an investigator, because I specialize in missing persons and fugitives and tracking people down, everything from, I used to be a war crimes investigator. I tracked down Nazi war criminals. I do a lot of cold cases. I do a lot of international cases because I know what I have used as the basis for an investigation. I cringe sometimes when I make a call or use a browser on my smartphone or send email from my smartphone or tweet from my smartphone. The damn problem is it is sometimes unavoidable. You can't live in the Stone Ages. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
If you want to be productive, if you want to have a happier, more productive, more fulfilling life, you've got to avail yourself of these things, and God help us, we're all screwed. I'm only marginally less screwed than you.
Yeah.
But I'm still screwed, and if I'm screwed, you are screwed to the max.
Why do you think it is, though, that we've all become so kind of cavalier about privacy?
And that's the secret. That's the secret. Privacy is not dead. Privacy has either committed suicide or we've killed it. It didn't die somewhere out of reach secretly. All of this information is self-contributed. Nobody's forcing you to use Gmail. It's just the best product out there. Nobody's forcing you to use Android. It's just a remarkable product. And with the new Android programming language that right now it does suck, but it's going to get better and better, and it's going to become HyperCard for cell phones, I think. When people are able to program for their own cell phones on Android, that's it. And by the way, after you use these products for a while, that's it. You're screwed forever. Think about what you would have to do to stop using Google, to stop using Gmail, to give up your Google Voice number, to entirely divest yourself of every Google product. It would be a nightmare.
Yeah, it would be actually for calendars.
Yeah, for the vast majority of the people.
Mm.
I mean, everybody communicates with you on your Gmail address. It's programmed into your phone. It's synced. You've got Google Calendars and Google Contacts and everything. I mean, it's really like the thug in the schoolyard that calls over a 12-year-old kid and says, "Here, kid, try this."
Mm.
And he takes his first hit off of a crack pipe, and second hit, and third hit. 3 weeks later, the guy's stealing his mother's, robbing his mother's purse to pay for crack.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of where everybody is with Google right now.
Mm. Yeah, it definitely seems like that. One thing I was going to ask is, do you think, are we past the point of being able to opt out of all this now? I mean, is this...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For the average person, yes. I mean, I have email addresses and web servers and whatnot that I use for individual cases or private communication. I've got a web domain name hosted on a separate server that I only communicate with my closest friends. Mm-hmm. I can assure you that my home address and my home landline number appears nowhere. Mm. And by the way, I rent my apartment and I pay for my utilities under the name of a dead person. Hmm. Now, by the way, I don't do that because I'm necessarily paranoid or I'm a privacy nut. In my case, keeping my physical location secret is actually fairly essential. I've had people arrested for plotting my demise. There have actually been people put on trial for my attempted murder because of some cases I've done. So in my case, it's not paranoia. I will tell you, though, that even if I didn't have these legitimate requirements, I'd probably do it anyway.
Yeah.
But that's an extreme that most people don't want to go to, don't want to deal with, are not in a position to do, and they definitely don't want to spend all that money.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean...
And by the way, we haven't even gone into financial issues or license plate readers or facial recognition or all of the other things. I mean, the UK is either the worst or the best with these things, depending on your point of view. Although China is very, very, very quickly passing the UK. China will have 7 million personal surveillance cameras, not including all of the cameras in private hands that are required to report to the Private Security Bureau. They will have 7 million plus about another 4 million by the end of this year. They will have 300,000 in Shanghai alone.
Yeah,
I'm told.
It's scary. I remember when I was doing my master's degree that one of the statistics that really used to worry me was that I think the UK alone had 25% of the world's CCTV cameras, which is
not anymore. No. Not anymore.
No.
But it's gone in just Greater London. It's gone from less than 100 in the late 60s to 4.2 million now. These are all of these things that we're talking about. You need to understand these are genies you can't put back in the bottle.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to give this stuff up. Nobody's going to legislate them out of existence, and people are not going to give up the convenience. And people just don't care.
You often see these agencies mentioned sometimes in the media, or you see websites online, and they offer the service of making you quote unquote disappear.
Yeah, that's crap.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that actually possible? Yeah.
Well, you know what? Maybe for your next podcast, you try to use one, and I'll come after you.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Rick Dacken.
Frankly, it'll be great free advertising for me.
There was a guy...
I've got to tell you, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Now, let me tell you, I did a book, which is only not out at this point in time because I have to finish up my end through not through any fault of my co-writer, Rick Dacken. There's a book coming out, hopefully within the next 6 to 10 months, called Stealing Your Own Identity, which I did with Rick Dakin. And for a year, he tried to hide. And I mean, he really tried to hide. False identity, renting apartments with cash, dropped cell phones, and I tried to find him. Now, at the end of the exercise, and by the way, here was the deal. The deal was, if he could stay hidden for 60 days, he would win.
Yeah.
If I could find him 10 times, I would win. And this was before the Obama election. And the deal was that if he won, I had to vote straight Democrat. And if I won, he had to vote straight Republican. I think if either of us had actually lost, there would have been a suicide involved. Because he's rather left-wing and I'm rather right-wing, even though we're good friends. We gave up after 9. We didn't take it to the 10. Because the last time that he tried to hide, it cost him about $15,000. And it cost me close to $20,000 to find him. Nobody is unfindable. If you give me a substantial enough budget, I will find anyone. I don't really care who they are. I don't care how hard they're trying to hide. I don't care how good their false identity is. They will make some mistake. They will do something. And thanks to computers, it's easier to find that information now. I mean, Rick and I gave up at the very end, but one time I found them through credit card usage, another time I found them through cell phone pinging, another time I found them through IP address. I scammed them into communicating with a trap IP address. I mean, it was all high-tech stuff. And I've got to tell you, that was 2.5 years ago. It's even better or worse, depending on your point of view now.
Yeah, it's
you cannot hide.
No.
You can't hide. And by the way, for the period of time that you do successfully hide, you will have a miserable, lonely, unproductive life.
Yeah, because no one can take pictures of you, I suppose, these days.
Well, you can't communicate with your friends and family, not in a truly normal, interactive way. You can't have a normal job. You can't partake in any of your usual hobbies. You can't email in any truly productive, normal way. You can't browse. You can't do anything. You can't even be out and about if the authorities are looking for you because facial recognition will grab you.
It's worrying.
You've got to pay with everything with cash. You've got to wear a very large hat for the cameras. You can't drive a vehicle, at least not one in your name or that you've rented normally. You can't bank. You can't do anything on the internet. You can't use a cell phone properly. I mean, you are completely and constantly screwed.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think the thing that really struck me the most about this whole conversation, I suppose, is that it's just, yeah, like you say, it's just too late now, isn't it? There is no way of backing out of this kind of almost surveillance society, I suppose, to use a cliche.
Once you post that information, it's gone forever. Once I know what your politics are, what your sexual preferences are, who your friends are, where you live, where you work, where you go to school, where you've gone to school, where you hang out, what your hobbies are, your likes and dislikes, what you read, what music you listen to. Once you've posted that, it's gone. It's been cached and buffered and grabbed and sucked down by 100 different sources. Not the least of which, by the way, is governmental agencies.
Yes. Anyway, I was going to say we've pretty much hit our limit of time now, I think, because we don't want to keep you for too long. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about was you said you run a service called Peoplefinder, and I think a couple of others. Can you talk a little bit about those services?
Well, I'm lucky in that I came into private investigation before there was an internet. My first computer was the original Mac, which ran off of a 128K floppy disk. None of these things were even fantasies when I started. So when the ability to develop databases and buy databases and have cross-reference databases started to emerge, a light bulb went off over my head. And I said, this would be great if, for example, in New York, where I have an office, if I had all the New York driving licenses, all the New York voter registration records, all the New York vehicle registration records, all the New York phone numbers, all the New York property records, everything, right in my office, and cross-referenced with names and addresses and phone numbers, I can, in the United States, for example, plug in your phone number and pull up your name, your address, your date of birth, your social security number, what property you own, your Facebook profile, your MySpace profile, your Twitter feeds, all of that just from inputting a phone number.
Mm.
Before I go out and investigate you, I know what in the past would have taken me a week to do as a preliminary investigation. I get it in 5 minutes. Now, mind you, that is not the primary part of my business, but it is a big and important part of my business. Mm. And it is not available to the general public. It's available to law enforcement and investigators only.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so, I mean, you do actually...
Our regular website, by the way, for your listeners, is at Pallorium.com. That's P as in Peter, ALLORIUM.com.
Yeah, and you can be hired as an investigator through that website, I believe.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't take a lot of the traditional type of cases. We won't follow your wife for you. We really don't care who your wife is sleeping with. And, you know, let me tell you, save a lot of your money if you think your wife is sleeping around. She is. So save your money. We do a lot of sophisticated financial fraud investigation. If you've been the victim of a fraudster, we are the primary agency out there. Finding missing persons, especially hardcore fugitives, hardcore locates of witnesses, you know, a lot of traditional missing person stuff. We do that also.
Brilliant. Well, Steve, thanks a lot for coming on the show. It's been both interesting and frightening.
Sorry about that, and glad to have helped.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.